作品を必要以上に大切にすることはわかる。錬金術師にとって不完全なものをよりの。
Dude, be careful. Weary might hear you and oh, too late. Continuing from the previous episode, Suo was making his way to the supposedly magic tree that Hagakure mentioned.
の中央にそびえ立つ大木。
さよう。その幹は天をつく。
So wait, the tree is actually a big drill? They also discussed the likely origins of Rivore and his practices, which stem from an underground culture of alchemists known as stock. Understandably, not being into the whole OP powers of equivalent exchange, the previous rulers of Atlantia tried to seal away Stock's teachings, but of course they couldn't get all of them.
ストークの錬金術師は動物の骨から生きた人形を作る。
Oh, so the Elric brothers had it wrong this whole time, and in fact, Tucker was in the right, and okay, I'll stop. And speaking of whom, Suo made his way to the tree in hopes they would turn him into a quote-unquote human, because, not too surprisingly, he was Rivore's first attempt at reviving his brother, who had passed away. And I guess you can't get much unless you sacrifice a few limbs, as just going by these pictures, the original Suo looked like your typical hot-headed shonen protagonist, while Suo 2... was Shinji Ikari if he took up singing. Regardless, Rivore was very much in the wrong for trying to take back his brother's soul that he had tried to implant in this homunculus, as no matter what, he was still a living being that he had created. The Sword Eyes of Light agreed and again tried to protect him. This time, Sora challenged him, following up on their meeting from the previous episode, as well as the dude himself just not approving of someone who tried to destroy his own creations.
創造主は完璧な存在を生み出さなければなりません。
Yeah, you just say that because you don't want to pay for his college. The fight played out as you expect, without either player using any effects or cards that we haven't already seen, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, as we also got to see Sora change up his playstyles to get around stuff like Belander's destruction effect. And the bigger takeaway from all of this was everything going on around this fight, as not only did Hagakure's eye react to something near the tree, but we also got some rather philosophical talks from this children's card game anime when Suo once again tried to run away because again, he's still in his Shinji phase.
人間とは何だ？骨人形。そしてドロイドとはどこが違うのだ？
Well, for starters, one is gonna have an easier time at the airport. Nah, but seriously, I really love stories like this where the characters, and in turn the viewers, really start to think about what defines someone as a human. In this case, Suo managed to get around Bringer by asking him what a non-organ heart was, and if you needed to be considered a true human. And I'm guessing philosophy wasn't in this robot's database. You gotta buy the newer version for that. Anyway, I think it was implied that Rivore threw the fight after he realized that Suo was on the run again. Otherwise, he should have been able to destroy Soldenerg with Spirit's effect here. And because he didn't, the Spirit's deck destruction effect was set off a total of 4 times, resulting in Sora defeating another purple deck user by deck out. Back with the other Sword Eyes, Tsurugi managed to snap his robot out of his little conundrum by telling him that some questions just don't have a clear answer, especially when it comes to stuff like humanity. Yeah, that's the attitude I went into Philosophy 101 with. I flunked it. Anyway, the episode ended with our protagonist debating on whether or not to follow up on this storyline, as clearly it was more of an issue between the brothers. Fortunately, they got something more significant they could focus on, as another sword brave had been discovered near Kizakura's hometown. They arrived on the continent of Megarayon, which I'm pretty sure that's some kind of kaiju. Wait, they have a card for that? Well, anyway, they went to Kizakura's company's HQ, which of course was a sweets manufacturer. Then, to her credit, she was working a solid operation that apparently included a social media following in this fantasy world. Damn, Instagram's influence is even spread across the multiverse. They also had correspondents who were able to pinpoint Kizakura's sword brave. Meanwhile, Amarello kind of rightfully offered to go fight her counterpart Sword Eye, but Brow again insisted on going in order to fight Bringer. And to be fair, Kizakura was still rather neutral on this whole conflict, because for her, she was more focused on her company rather than defeating an evil king and all that. Regardless, she did at least feel obligated to acquire something that had been calling out to her ever since childhood when she first met another Sword Eyes in Sora. Thus, they arrived at a field of sunflowers that took on the shape of Cupid because, get it, it's one of her favorite cards. Yeah, that probably should have been a significant sign that her magical sword and card were there. However, just as they found them, Brow arrived with his troops. Knowing that they might launch an attack on her town, Kizakura challenged them, which Brow agreed to, and didn't fight her, as he was still very much obsessed with Bringer. Instead, he sent out one of his lieutenants named Reagan,
まだ引き返せる。おとなしくソードブレイブを渡して家へ帰れ。
Gee, I wonder if this guy has a reference to anyone in particular. Well, clearly, this was all a reference to Curtis Axel, because once Axelmania comes around, and no, of course, it was Hulk Hogan, who, yes, is very popular in Japan, even having a very significant run in New Japan Pro Wrestling. Side note, if you thought his leg drop was a lame finisher, check out the Axe Bomber. Nah, but seriously, I heard that it's actually one of his better runs, and maybe worth checking out if you have the time. Anyway, he used the blue deck, though unlike with Sora, it wasn't focused on deck destruction, but more effect negation, like Ryugushi here, being able to prevent opposing spirits from standing while it was attacking. Not that it really mattered, as Kizakura actually wanted to take the attacks so that she could use her best cards. Larafyle's effect not only allowed her to decrease an opposing spirit's power when she attacked, but if it was reduced down to 0, then it would be bounced onto the top of the opponent's deck. Yeah, effects like this are really strong in my opinion, as you're effectively locking your opponent from getting any new cards, which is only made worse if the sent card was already weak. Hence why I think Kizakura actually has one of the best decks in the show. Not that Reagan thought so, in spite of clearly being on the losing side.
普通の人間は我々優秀なアトランティア王国の言うことを聞いて。
Well, I see they got one of the more essential traits of Hogan down pat. Worst of all was that Kizakura was all too familiar with adults like him, having been extorted as a kid who grew up orphaned and homeless. The only thing that kept her going was the kindness of her friends, who gave her probably one of the saltiest, and yet also most yummy sweets ever. That one act of kindness gave her the determination to start working hard to make a difference in their young, struggling community, who were all discriminated against just because of their ages and social status. And don't worry too much about those guys, they had their shadows turned into monsters by some crazy moth lady. Just want to point out that Kizakura is supposedly 16 in this series, and while such a young entrepreneur would be unlikely, I really do like her backstory of overcoming some truly unfair prejudices. And realizing how much Tsurugi was also putting in to help others, like his mom, gave her the resolve to join his little crusade, just as soon as she took down this asshole. Angelic Feather basically had its own power subtraction effect, meaning that she could use Larafyle's decklock effect twice. It also lets wielder stand after a full power reduction, meaning that Larafyle could attack twice and turn Hogan into a total jobber. Pretty sure only Brock Lesnar has that title. And with that, the episode ended with Kizakura sealing their new union with sweets for everyone, of course. You know, it takes a truly great anime to have a Precure beat Hulk Hogan. I mean, that fact alone should sell anyone, but this show also does have some pretty fantastic world building, with these two episodes having highlighted some strong themes of humanity and classism. Sure, it's still written like a kid's show, but when life starts to become as crazy as it is now, the line between fiction and reality starts to become a lot thinner. The common theme between these two episodes was one of oppression, from Rivori trying to assert absolute dominance over Suo, to the Atlantean adults extorting Kizakura, who were both just products of a world that pushed this idea that some are lesser than others. And while I'm not totally of the belief that the world needs major social changes, there is no real arguing that these sorts of people do exist. Thus, often, the best thing to do is stand by your friends and try to make things better for everyone. For this show, it produces a strong conflict that has managed to bring the oppressed Sword Eyes of Light together, whilst their counterparts in the Eyes of Darkness could barely cooperate with each other because they've become so ingrained with their own selfish aspirations. Rivori actually refused to join Yaiba, as he even found the king to be below his motives of callously trying to shape his still-living homunculus into his brother. It of course made Suo's struggles of figuring out what defines humanity all the more tragic. Meanwhile, Kizakura really did become one of my favorite characters after this episode. Her determination to open up a full-on company was very admirable, and her deck just looks like it would be a lot of fun to use. Plus again, she's a magical girl who defeated a Hulk Hogan stand-in. What more could you ask for? It's overall just some really good character and world building, with everything just feeling interconnected, as the characters are basically all products of their environments. Not much else really needs to be said, other than when is Kizakura going to get her Wrestlemania moment? Thank you for watching, and maybe if you have the time, you could also go check out our Halloween video that we released yesterday. It's a video highlighting another show with a well-developed world and villains that not enough people appreciate in the Precure franchise with the Selfish Kingdom from Doki Doki. I think we managed to make some pretty fun videos for this Halloween, but next time we're returning to the Max Heart reviews, which might be less so. Still do look forward to it. Until then though, for now my friends, and someone ripped the Hulkster shirt again. Hey dude, if you don't want people to rip it, maybe you shouldn't make that little tear in it beforehand.